The HOA meeting was in full meltdown when Denise Farrow, president of the Silvercrest Bluffs HOA, slammed her fist on the folding table and barked with a voice that could strip paint. "Drag the Vineyard owner here now." The room went quiet as I stood up from the back row, brushing imaginary dust from my flannel shirt, and said in the calmest tone I could muster, "You're looking at him, and by the way, I own the entire valley your houses are sitting in." The blood drained from her face so fast I thought someone had hit the dimmer switch on her perpetual tan. Name's Graham Porter. I inherited a 240-acre vineyard and surrounding land in Hawthorne Valley, California from my uncle Theodore about 3 years ago. Before that, I was just another corporate drone pushing papers in San Francisco. But Uncle Theo's gift changed everything. Now I spend my days tending the vines, making small batch wines, and hosting the occasional tasting for friends who appreciate a good Pinot Noir. The subdivision up the hill, Silvercrest Bluffs, sprung up about 15 years ago, complete with a very proud HOA that seemed to think the valley existed purely as a backdrop for their Instagram shots and Sunday brunch photos. The trouble started about 6 months after I took over the vineyard. Denise Farrow moved into the neighborhood after her third divorce. Apparently flushed with settlement money and desperate to find a new kingdom to rule. Within 2 weeks, she'd maneuvered herself onto the HOA board. And within 2 months, she'd staged what the former board members called a hostile takeover to become president. She ran that HOA like her personal thief, measuring grass height with a ruler and issuing fines for mailboxes that were half a shade off the approved beige color palette. Her first complaint letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, typed in what I can only describe as aggressive Comic Sans font. She was concerned about quote-unquote excessive tractor noise during her morning yoga sessions at 6:30 a.m. Never mind that vineyard work starts at dawn and has for the past century. The second letter, arriving 3 days later, complained about the smell of fermentation drifting uphill during their wine and cheese socials, which struck me as particularly ironic. She suggested I should schedule all vineyard operations around their community calendar, which he helpfully attached in a 47-page document that included such critical events as Denise's monthly mindfulness meditation and the Silvercrest Bluffs semi-annual mailbox beautification day. I ignored her letters, which was apparently the wrong move. Denise escalated by sending me official HOA citations for blocking scenic easements because my grapevines were quote overgrown and obstructing the valley views from the community gazebo. She claimed the HOA had established viewing rights that superseded agricultural use. Her tone in these letters grew increasingly shrill, using phrases like immediate compliance required and failure to respond will result in legal action. She even had the audacity to CC the county planning department, though they just filed her complaints in what I imagine is a very large circular file. The situation deteriorated when she started showing up at the vineyard gate, always with her phone recording, demanding to inspect my property for HOA compliance. She'd stand there in her designer workout clothes that had clearly never seen actual exercise, waving printed copies of HOA bylaws that she insisted applied to my land. I'd watch her from my porch, sipping coffee and waving cheerfully while my vineyard manager, Louise, pretended not to understand English whenever she tried to interrogate him about our farming schedule. The breaking point came on a Thursday afternoon when Denise sent her newly appointed community liaison, a nervous real estate agent named Bradley Hutchinson, to deliver what she called a courtesy notice. Bradley, sweating through his polo shirt despite the mild weather, informed me that the HOA board had voted to repurpose part of my vineyard for a shared dog park and community garden. They would coordinate construction dates and generously allow me to relocate my vines to a less visible area of the property. He actually used air quotes when he said generously, which told me even he knew how ridiculous this was. I asked Bradley to wait while I fetched something from my office. What I fetched was a file I'd been building since Denise's first letter, including county plat maps dating back to 1923. As Bradley shifted uncomfortably on my porch, I spread the maps across the table and pointed to the property lines. The entire subdivision, every single house, every road, even their beloved scenic pond with a fountain that played classical music on Sundays, sat on land that my uncle Theodore had never actually sold. The developer, a company called Sunset Vista Development that went bankrupt in 2008, had negotiated a 99-year agricultural lease with my uncle back in 2005 with an option to buy that was never exercised. Here's where it gets interesting, I told Bradley, whose face was growing paler by the second. The lease expired 5 years ago, and in the chaos of the developer bankruptcy and my uncle's declining health, nobody had renewed it. The HOA had been collecting fees, enforcing rules, and acting like they owned the place. But legally, those $800,000 homes were sitting on my Vineyard's property without any legal right to be there. Bradley excused himself rather quickly after that, and I heard his Prius practically screaming down the gravel road. Within an hour, my phone was buzzing with calls from Denise. Each voicemail more frantic and threatening than the last. She used words like extortion, harassment, and unconscionable, though I don't think she knew what that last one actually meant. I didn't return her calls. Instead, I had my attorney, Sandra Gwynn, send a cheerful letter to Denise and the HOA board. The letter stated that effective immediately, all non-authorized use of Hawthorne Valley lands was prohibited, including subdivision access roads. I offered them 2 options. Negotiate a lease at $4,000 per home per year for the 212 homes in Silvercrest Bluffs or face eviction proceedings that would begin in 30 days. The math was simple but devastating. $848,000 per year plus 5 years of back rent totaling over $4 million. Of course, I was willing to be reasonable and accept a structured payment plan, but the terms were non-negotiable. Sandra added a particularly beautiful paragraph about how the HOA's own aggressive enforcement of property rights had inspired me to protect my own interests with equal vigor. Denise called an emergency meeting for that Friday night, sending out notices that screamed in all caps about urgent legal matter affecting all homeowners. She must have spent a fortune on copying because every house got a thick packet of documents that she claimed proved the HOA's rightful claim to the land. Most of it was nonsense, mixing real estate jargon with what looked like citations from Wikipedia. She even included a section on adverse possession that completely misunderstood how California property law works. The meeting was held in the Silvercrest Bluffs Community Center, a building that I couldn't help but note was also sitting on my land. I arrived 15 minutes late, partly for dramatic effect and partly because I wanted to give Sandra time to set up her presentation. I also brought along 3 special guests: James Reeves, the county assessor, Patricia Wong from the reporter's office, and my personal favorite, Tommy Brelin, a reporter from the Valley Gazette who'd been following the story since Bradley's panicked call to his editor. The room was packed, standing room only, with worried homeowners cluttering every available space. Denise stood at the front, gripping the podium like it might flee if she let go. She was midway through a speech about predatory landlords and protecting the American dream when she spotted me in the back. Her face turned an alarming shade of purple as she pointed a manicured finger at me and shouted in a voice that could have shattered wine glasses. "There is security. Drag the Vineyard owner here now." The problem was there was no security. The elderly gentleman who usually checked parking passes at community events was home with a cold. The crowd turned to look at me as I made my way to the front. Sandra beside me with a briefcase and a smile that could freeze helium. Patricia Wong followed with an armload of official documents while James Reeves looked like he was trying not to laugh. Tommy Brelin was already typing on his phone, probably live tweeting the whole disaster. "Good evening, everyone," I said, taking the microphone that Denise tried to keep from me. "I'm Graham Porter, owner of Hawthorne Valley Vineyard, and as it turns out, the land you're all sitting on right now." The room erupted. Denise tried to grab the microphone back, actually lunging at me before Sandra stepped between us. People were shouting questions, accusations, and more than a few expletives that I won't repeat. It took James Reeves holding up his official county badge and threatening to clear the room before everyone settled down enough for me to continue. Sandra took over, projecting documents onto the community center screen. The original land deed, the expired lease, the bankruptcy documents showing the developer never exercised their option to purchase. Patricia Wong confirmed that every document was authentic and on file with the county. The smoking gun was a letter from my uncle to the HOA dated 6 years ago, informing them that the lease would not be renewed and they needed to negotiate new terms. Denise had been president then too, during her first stint on the board and had apparently ignored the letter entirely. "This is illegal." Denise shrieked, her composure completely shattered. "You can't just steal our homes. We've been paying property taxes. We have mortgages." Sandra addressed this with the patience of a kindergarten teacher. "You've been paying taxes on the structures, not the land. The land has always been assessed to Mr. Porter and his uncle before him. As for your mortgages, that's between you and your lenders, who apparently failed to perform adequate due diligence." The crowd turned on Denise like a pack of wolves, sensing weakness. Someone shouted that she'd been president when the original notice arrived. Another pointed out that she'd raised HOA fees 3 times to fund her legal threats against other neighbors. A woman in the third row stood up and accused Denise of gross negligence and demanded her immediate resignation. I let the chaos continue for exactly 3 minutes, timing it on my watch before taking back the microphone. "I'm not interested in making anyone homeless," I said, which got their attention. "I'm offering a fair lease that will allow everyone to stay in their homes. $4,000 per year is below market rate for land lease in this area. However, there are conditions." I outlined the terms Sandra and I had developed. The lease would be for 25 years with an option to renew. The HOA could continue to exist, but with no authority over any vineyard operations. Any interference with my agricultural business would result in immediate lease termination. And Denise Farrow would need to resign from the HOA board immediately and be permanently banned from holding any HOA position. "That's discrimination," Denise screamed. But even her supporters were backing away from her. "Now it's a business decision," Sandra corrected. "Your harassment of Mr. Porter constitutes tortious interference with his agricultural operations. This is actually generous as he could pursue criminal charges for trespassing and harassment." Tommy Berlin raised his hand like he was in school. "Mr. Porter, what about the back rent? 5 years at $848,000 per year is over $4 million. I smiled. "I'm willing to settle for $300,000 in back rent to be paid by the HOA's reserve fund, not individual assessments. Consider it a discount for the entertainment value of the past few months." The vote was called right there. Denise tried to object, claiming they needed proper notice and Robert's Rules of Order, but the board overruled her. The vote to accept the lease terms was 209 in favor, 3 against. The vote to remove Denise from the board was unanimous. Even her usual allies abandoning her. She stood at the podium, mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water as the crowd actually applauded her removal. The next morning, the Valley Gazette ran Tommy's story with the headline, "HOA built on borrowed land. Owner demands rent." The story went viral, picked up by national news outlets who loved the David versus Goliath angle, though I'm not sure I was really David in this scenario. Denise became an internet meme with her purple face drag him here now becoming a GIF that still circulates on social media. Within a week, the HOA had signed the lease agreement. Sandra made sure every term was ironclad, including a provision that any future harassment would result in immediate eviction of the offending party. The $300,000 in back rent was paid via wire transfer, depleting most of the HOA's reserves that Denise had built up through her excessive fines. I used part of the windfall to expand production, adding 10 acres of Cabernet Sauvignon and upgrading our bottling equipment. But the best investment was the new wine label I created, Karen's Reserve, a bold red blend with 14% alcohol content. The label features a silhouette of a finger-wagging woman against a background of neat vineyard rows. The back label tells an abbreviated version of this story, noting that it's, quote, "a wine with a perfect amount of bitter notes and an unexpectedly satisfying finish." It's become our best seller at tastings, especially when I tell the full story to visitors. We've sold over 5,000 bottles in the first year alone with shipping requests from across the country. I even sent a complimentary case to Denise's former address, though I heard she moved to Arizona after the incident. The Silver Crest Bluffs, HOA, still exists, but it's a much quieter organization now. They focus on maintaining the common areas that actually belong to them and organizing community events that don't involve harassing neighbors. The new president, a retired teacher named Harold Simpson, sends me a nice card every Christmas and always waves when he drives past the vineyard. As for Denise, The last I heard, she was facing a civil lawsuit from 12 homeowners seeking damages for her negligence in handling the land lease situation. Her real estate license was also under review after several former clients came forward with complaints about her bullying tactics during transactions. The legal fees alone reportedly exceeded $200,000, and her attorney withdrew from the case when she couldn't pay the retainer. She ended up representing herself, which went about as well as you'd expect. The judge awarded the plaintiff $75,000 in damages plus legal fees. And when Denise declared bankruptcy to avoid payment, the local news ran one final story with her court appearance photo showing her in tears as the judgment was